We roll? Okay, hey there. Good morning, evening, or afternoon. My name is Nathan Valentine, and I chose to make this presentation about the MPAA rating system and the many issues surrounding it in our complex modern society. This seemed to be a very suitable topic because many people find this to be an encroachment on the general public's personal sense of morality, while others find it sensible to have some sort of gauging system for sensitive material. And some find that it has not made itself consistent with the ratings made in the past, which makes it sort of a multi-layered issue. So it has certainly become a very hotly debated issue at the center of mass media today. Now, before we get into discussing the issues surrounding the rating system, I'd just like to do a little review of how exactly the MPAA describes its graduated content rating system. This, in and of itself, sparks the debate from the get-go because of how open-ended and opinionated that this system really is. Listen closely for the loose opinion words like might, appropriate. There's very little black or white in this scale. It's all gray. Rated G means all ages admitted. This movie contains nothing that would offend parents for viewing by children. Such films may contain only mild violence or crude humor, and may have no nudity, sex, drugs, or coarse language. The discrimination and emotional intensity must be minimal. Rated PG means that some material may not be suitable for children. Parents are urged to give parental guidance as the motion picture contains some material that parents might not find suitable for their pre-teenagers. PG-13 means parents strongly caution. Parents are urged to be cautious as the motion picture contains some material that parents might consider inappropriate for children under 13 years. Rated R means restricted. People under 17 years may only be admitted if accompanied by a parent or guardian. NC-17 means adults only. This film is exclusively adult and people under 18 are not admitted. Anyway, next I'd like to discuss a little bit of the history behind the rating system, as it's important to know where and when it came from and why the system is still plagued by the concept of its inception. The history of the MPAA is at the center of the issue because it sort of parallels the shift in moral guidelines in our country. Our moral code continues to become less guided by religion and is more guided by scientific pragmatism. Not to mention, the internet holds no secrets and more children are becoming more exposed to more harsh realities from more resources, and parents keep having less control over what their children are seeing. When the MPAA was founded, America was in a very different place morally and historically speaking. Before it was called the MPAA, or the Motion Picture Association of America, it was known as the MPPDA, or the Motion Picture Production and Distribution Association, as it had regulation over film distribution as well as film content. From 1934 until 1966, there was a film regulation system in place called the Motion Pictures Production Code, otherwise known as the Hays Code, which only contained two extremes: what was acceptable for public audiences and what was not. So adults, young adults, teenagers, pre-teenagers, and children were all thrown into the same category with each other, and the things that were considered unacceptable were banned from the theaters altogether. It's really shocking how different the morals of the time period were only 60 or 70 years ago. The Hays Code had a list of don'ts and be carefuls, and included on this list of don'ts was the use of pointed profanity, including the words God, Lord, Jesus Christ, hell, and damn, unless used reverently in proper religious ceremonies. Also on the list of don'ts was interracial cohabitation, marriage, or depictions of white slavery, scenes of childbirth in fact or in silhouette, any reference of sexual perversion, and the ridicule of the clergy. So, wow, what a different time. You really can see the heavy influence of Christianity in these implementations, and many people criticize the same puritanical influence existing in the MPAA still today. When Jack Valenti became president of the organization in 1966, he pointed out how this system was practically a violation of the First Amendment right to free speech, and in essence he was right. Imagine the outrage if something like the Hays Code were put into place today. Anyway, he reinvented the code to include the SMA stopgap and to accommodate, quote, the irresistible force of creators determined to make their films and to avoid the possible intrusion of government into the movie arena, unquote. Thereafter, in 1968, there was a system of advisory ratings put into application which paved the way for a whole new era of movie making and popularity, and the rating system went through 6 amendments in order to better suit consumers. For example, since 1990, the association would add an explanation as to why a film was given the R rating, and some found those to be insufficient reasons to be so harshly rated, while others thought the R rating should include more categories of harsh material. But the MPAA simply argued, you can't make everyone happy. And indeed, that is the ongoing problem for the MPAA. A whole world of issues has risen out of their rating system. Just to name a few examples, filmmakers have big issues with the NC-17 rating because it can practically ruin the commercial viability of their film. The NC-17 rating is typically found in art house productions where movie patrons are more likely to have a neutral impression of the rating as opposed to the more sensitive patrons of the major cinema chain theaters. A few years ago, there was a big controversy about the MPAA's decision to give the film Blue Valentine an NC-17 rating. It was made by a film company called Weinstein, and they challenged this decision, and the MPAA ended up awarding the same cut of that film an R rating because of the appeal. NC-17 films are also not allowed widespread advertisement, and given the refusal of major cinema chains to show NC-17s, many such films will never be accessible to people who live in markets that do not have art house theaters. In 2004, there was a theater called Carmike Theaters in Columbus, Georgia that had R cards, which would let teens see R-rated films without adult accompaniment. The cards generated lots of controversy, and Jack Valenti said in a news interview, "I think it distorts and ruptures the intent of this voluntary film rating system. All R-rated films are not alike." The MPAA is often criticized for being too concerned with sex and strong language and not enough with violence. The film critic named Robert Ebert argued that the system places too much emphasis on sex while allowing the portrayal of massive amounts of intense violence. The uneven emphasis on sex versus violence is concurred with by the public and other film critics. Moreover, Ebert argued that the rating system is geared toward looking at trivial aspects of the film, such as the number of times a profane word is used, rather than at the general theme of the film. He called for an A or adult rating to indicate that films high in mature or violent content should not be marketed to teenagers, but do not have NC-17 levels of sex. He also said that the NC-17 rating should be removed and have the X rating revived. He felt that everyone understood what X rating meant, while fewer people understood what the NC-17 meant, although the X rating has become heavily synonymous with porn. Independent film distributors, who have become increasingly popular in recent years, have claimed that major companies' releases often get far more lenient treatment than independent films. They claim, for example, that Saving Private Ryan, with its intense depiction of the D-Day invasion of Normandy, would have earned an NC-17 rating had it not been a Steven Spielberg film. Many critics often ask to see the MPAA rating system unveiled and the standards made public. We have very little to no idea of just how the process is undertaken. The consumers in the industry are left totally in the dark. The MPAA likes to cite nationwide polls, which indicate that parents tend to like the rating system because they find the ratings useful. Critics, such as Matt Stone, who is the creator of the TV show South Park, argues that parents only find the ratings useful because that's the only rating systems offered to them. And lastly, there has always been concern nationwide about the explicit content of films. However, the MPAA has recently been accused of a ratings creep, which means that the films of today's categories have more objectionable and graphic material than would have been put in the same categories not long ago. Harvard School of Public Health did a study on movie content a few years ago and declared that there had been a noticeable increase in the level of profanity, sex, and violence in films released between the 90s and the 2000s. Kimberly Thompson, the director of the study, stated that the findings demonstrate that the ratings creep had occurred over the past 2 decades and that today's movies contain significantly more violence, sex, and profanity on average than movies at the same rating a decade ago. So, in conclusion, it is best to say that the next few years should be very interesting for the MPAA. This theoretically moralistic organization has been a determining factor of what we teach our children and when. Since motion picture entertainment is a major industry in the United States, cinema is oftentimes the main way that children learn about the horrors of the world, making it an issue that should be continuously tended to. Thank you.